Okay, before we actually drill the hole for the dot, I need to cover a piece of equipment that's extremely useful for pipe repair tasks. You won't find pipe makers who use these very much, but I could not do what I do without this thing. It's called an XY table, and that would be, you zoom in a little bit. That would be this piece of gear here. There's a dial on this side, a crank rather, and another one over here, and it moves side to side and back and forth. The table itself moves up and down. And what this thing allows you to do is whatever you've got to drill, you can center it within 1/1000th of an inch, just precisely underneath the where the drill is going to come down, and you can accommodate unusually shaped objects. If you try to drill holes using a lathe, it works fine as long as you're using regular material like cylindrical rod or blocks that you've cut to be exactly 90 degrees on a side and such as that. But once you have a pipe that's actually made, it's going to be a casual shape, an irregular shape. And then when you find a way to clamp that in these guys here, you then have to be able to move your target around, because the shaft of the drill press itself, of course, doesn't move. It goes up and down, but it doesn't move side to side or back and forth. So if you're going to go the drill press route in pipe repair, which I highly recommend, look into an XY table. Now this particular vise arrangement here, that had to be cobbled together. This the red piece here is called an angle block. It's a machinist's thing that they use for squaring stuff up. The company made that Suburban, and I sent it off to a machinist who then added this faceplate and machined the grooves in the face of it, put these studs into it, and allowed me to attach it firmly to the XY table. And this type of machine here is necessary because you're going to also be clamping all kinds of irregularly shaped stuff. And that's a whole nother series of tapes on how you do that. That's some of the most difficult parts of pipe repair, is handling irregular objects without squishing them or marring them or cracking them. But that's for another time. Anyway, we're going to take the stem of this pipe we've been working on. First of all, make darn sure that you've marked the top. If you take the stem out and you mark the top or the bottom, you mark the bottom incorrectly, then drill a hole, shame on you, because they almost never, it's possible, but it's very rare for a stem to fit the same way upside down as it does right side up. So you mark it, and here we've just got a little silver dot there. You can maybe see it, maybe not, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to clamp this in there and drill a hole. Now this technique of drilling and how you fabricate the filler material for the hole will come in handy for all kinds of brands other than Dunhill, Ashton, Sassini, many of the Italian brands. The dots are very easy to do compared with some of the more complicated irregular shapes. And so many companies use dots, and the way that I do dots is foolproof and quick. And you'll say, gosh, why didn't I think of that? It took me a while to cook up the method, and then once I did, I never looked back. You'll see what I mean here in just a minute. So anyhow, let's get this clamped up. We'll drill a hole, and then I'll machine the rod stock that goes into, or I'm sorry, in this case it's a sliver of real ivory that's going to go into that hole. Okay, I've got the stem chucked into the vise here, and using it's like a center punch type of thing. It's just a piece of unfluted drill rod that's been sharpened to a needle point, and you put that in the chuck and you hover it around until you're right over the spot where you want to go. I'll even move this slightly in the final few steps of this so you can see it in action. And there we go. Bullseye. And this comes out, the drill bit goes in. Now the bits that I use for holes are not something you've probably seen before. They're jeweler's bits. They're tiny little guys that, I'm not sure what focuses here. They're cut way down. They're super short and rigid for their diameter, and they will give you a far more, they're sharper. They'll give you a far more accurate hole than the type of drill bit that you're used to seeing. These will, the type of tip they have, they tend to drift around a bit. They'll flex on you. If you're going to drill small, precise holes, you want jeweler's bits. And then you can make even a little block of them. I've got these for the different brands of the different size diameters. We're going to go to a 0.067 or 67 thousandths of an inch. And I obtained that number by checking a pipe that was manufactured 1 year after this one in 1954, and they were still using the same size dots during that era, and so we're not making a mistake in historical accuracy. Oh yeah, I said the drill is next. Actually not. We want the center bit. Center, I'm never quite sure what they call it. I think it's spotting bit, and you just make a dimple with it. Doesn't take much. And the hole on this needs to be about, oh gosh, about 3 millimeters deep probably. Because we're actually still going to remove some material and make this cylindrical portion ever so slightly smaller, and we don't want to cut through our dot. It should be a post that's actually embedded in there. Just be sure that you don't find your way down into the airway. That can cause problems that I won't get into right now, but you don't want to do that. So for the sake of clarity here, I will mark this guy with a piece of tape so that we don't go too deep. Like that. And slow this down to about, do 535 RPM. And let's drill a hole. Now, the next order of business is to fashion the dot material itself. And you're probably wondering, how in the world do you source material in rods of both the material you like, whatever that might be, brass or turquoise colored or ivory colored or whatever, in all of these different diameters? And that is a major problem. I know people that use the tips of knitting needles and all sorts of exotic stuff that they scrounge through antique stores looking for objects that contain little rods of various colors. I mean, they make quite a project out of it. I found a shortcut, and I'll share that with you as soon as we move the camera. Welcome back to the Burr King. I mounted a 2-inch belt this time. I think it's 120 grit. Welcome once again to the cordless electric drill. This is a section of real ivory from a walrus tusk. There's no elephants were harmed in the making of this pipe stem. This is perfectly legal type of ivory. You can get it at any number of sources on the internet. You want to not use the crackle portion in the center, but the casing, kind of like the enamel, I guess it would be on a human tooth, toward the edge. Well, you just take a hacksaw. This stuff is very, very, very hard and tough. Take a hacksaw, cut a splinter off of that thing, mount it into the chuck of an electric drill. Now, it's pentagonal this time, but that doesn't make any difference at all because it's self-centering. You start grinding down the high spots, and then you're left with just a perfect cylinder in the middle. Now, there's a bit of skill and practice involved here because you're not only going to grind it to a certain diameter, but you're also going to put about a 1/2 degree or less taper on it, so it's an ever so slight cone. And the reason is you get a much better fit. There's no gaps to worry about. It's a superior way to do it. You can also take chunks of briar, like on a Radice pipe or the center of an Ashton emblem. Those have briar dots. You don't need to get briar rod from some source. You don't need to whittle them or find a pencil sharpener kind of a machine. Do them on a belt sander and a drill. Now you want the rotation of this work to be opposite the direction of the belt's travel. And I'll just fire it up here. Now again, this is a noisy one along with the vacuum, so I'll have to stop talking and you can just watch me do it. It'll also look a little bit like this belt's wobbling. It really isn't. Well, the belt is actually a little crooked. The wheel is not. There's no problem with the machine. It's the belt got stored, weird hook up here and got a little bit of a warp to it, but it doesn't have any effect over the flatness of the center, which is all that matters. So I'm going to be doing this number here until we get to the proper size. Okay, I'm going to stop this step, or not step, but this particular grit of paper. I used it to reduce the size of this, but it leaves kind of scratchy grooves on the side of this thing, so I'm going to switch it for a smoother grade of paper and finish this up. And you don't need to see anything from here on other than nothing changes. I just will bring it down to 57 thousandths of an inch and show you the result. So this is pretty boring to watch, but this one you had to actually see it done. You can also make military mount stems this way. All kinds of magic happens on this workstation here. So I'll be back when I've finished the dot. Voila! See the red paper here, I think this is 240, something like that, and a little bit worn besides, so we got a nice finish on this thing. It's a good squeak fit. And how you achieve that is you make the entire thing just ever so slightly too loose at the tip so that it fits, but it's not quite as tight as you want. And then while it's spinning, still in the drill, gently touch the end of it till you'll get a matching shape on the end of it, just like a drill bit, and it'll bottom completely, and just take off about a ½ millimeter at a time until you achieve the diameter that you want for the hole that you've drilled. And that's such a good fit, you could probably just saw it off and leave it forever with no glue and it would stay for years and years, but there's certainly no, you're not going to do that, but I'd bet money it would stay. It's that tight. So we'll put a touch of super glue on that, crank it in, and then how you cut this off is important. You'll be tempted to clip it, like side cutters or something like that. Don't do that. Ivory will shatter, and if it breaks off below the level of the stem, you're going to start over again. Take a razor saw and very gently cut through it. It only takes 30 seconds, but it'll keep you from ever having the thing pop. It'll also give you the ability to cut it quite close to the surface so that you can reuse this piece of ivory for the next time you make a dot. Maybe it'll be a little larger one, but Dunhill dots vary in size. So don't throw that away when you're done. And then we're going to do a final sanding on this and shine it up and bend it and call it a day, I believe.